Hello, everyone, and welcome to Getting Started with PagerDuty. My name is Camden Louie. I'm a senior technical trainer with our PagerDuty University team. The PagerDuty University team is the customer education team at PagerDuty. I am based in our San Francisco office, so if you're ever in the area, please do stop by and visit us there. For today's session, we are going to be going through the following topics. We'll begin with a look at the PagerDuty overview, ensuring that everybody has the same baseline understanding of what PagerDuty does. I will then show you how to configure your PagerDuty account, starting with looking at users and user permissions in the account before we move on to our schedules or rotations, and then the escalation policies. These are necessary configuration items to connect those users to the incidents that we will be triggering towards the end of the session. I will also show you how to configure services, both technical and business services, before we pull all of those different configuration items together in that incident response. Now, to begin with, I wanted to take a step back and ensure that everybody has that higher level view of what PagerDuty is meant to do for your teams. So our job is to help you make sure that the right resources, meaning the right people, are identified and immediately assigned to those critical incidents. We do that to help reduce things like mean time to resolution and to hopefully improve your operational reliability. So as I look at this visual from left to right, PagerDuty can ingest hundreds of different kinds of alerts of events from your deployment tools, monitoring tools, ticketing systems. And as PagerDuty takes that enormous collection of real events from your systems, they can use, our platform can use event intelligence and machine learning to help reduce some of that noise so that you can focus on what's most important. From there, we will try to automate as many diagnostics and remediation steps as possible so that by the time a human is interrupted, woken up, pulled in to this incident, we can give as much information as possible to that user. And we've hopefully taken some of those repeatable manual steps and already tried them or gathered the right diagnostics and information that will be useful to that human responder to then assess. Now, once we've assigned it to that responder, to that person, and we've mobilized our teams, well, there's going to be an urgency that is assigned to the alerts as they come through PagerDuty, and that will also help us determine how we are going to route that incident. How we get to the right team will be based on an on-call schedule or rotation. And then to make sure that we don't miss any important steps, we will create escalation policies and have those defined. That means that if the first person cannot acknowledge the incident, we always have a backup person on call. And then altogether, we're just trying to ensure that the right responders are engaged, that you have mechanisms to inform your stakeholders, and that any of our responders are given the actions needed to help keep that downtime to an absolute minimum. So again, automating actions where possible, both before we mobilize the team and after we have given them the appropriate information. We want to try to automate as many processes as possible. So hopefully this visual gives you an idea of where PagerDuty sits in that broader incident management process. So now that we understand the power of PagerDuty and the Operations Cloud, I want to just start by setting up some of the basics of the PagerDuty account. And there are a few key pieces that we're going to implement today. I'm going to go right into my PagerDuty demo account to start showing you where you can begin. Now, the first thing that you will need to do is to add users to the PagerDuty account. Without other team members in your account, it's very difficult to coordinate responses. You cannot collaborate with those other team members, both of which are going to help you to resolve those incidents, to figure out how to fix that problem faster. So the first thing you can do is navigate to the People menu. From there, you can find a user directory. Now, depending on your role within the account, you will have the ability to create users or to view users. And I'll talk a little bit about roles in just a moment. Here in the user directory, we are able to see all of the existing users in my account. I can search for anybody by name. So let's say I wanted to see if Hermione had been added. I can see that she has been added to this account. Great. I can also filter my view based on the teams that have been created within the PagerDuty account. So it would help me to narrow down my search from 57 users, or excuse me, 62 users, down to a smaller number. I can also filter based on base roles or by tags. Now, we are not going to talk about how to set up all of these different pieces today for this getting started session, but I wanted to mention them so that you can come back and explore further. Now, the first thing we're going to do is add a new user. So I'm going to click on this this add user button in the top right-hand corner. So add user, type in the first and last name of your new team member. Let's say Padma has just joined us, and I'm going to put in Padma's email address. This is a fake email address, just so everybody knows. Then we can choose a license type. Is this going to be somebody who has full user permissions or somebody who has a stakeholder level of permission? Okay, so there are a number of different license types and permission types within the PagerDuty platform. For the bulk of our users, I'm going to be using full user licenses. I did want to mention stakeholder licenses. They're a different type of license. If you have these in your account, these are going to be folks who need to see what's going on, but never need to take action on an incident. Now, for some organizations, that could be somebody like a customer support team member. They need to be kept up to date about incidents, but they are not going to be part of the team resolving that problem. Or perhaps you have executives who you want to keep updated without needing them to delve in deeper into the incident itself. So those could be stakeholders. I also have full users. Now, again, depending on the platform that you're using and the types of permissions enabled, you might see different labels here, but the principles are very similar. For users, for full users, we have a few different base roles. We have roles where I can give somebody a level of permission at the base level for the entire account. And let's say I give Padma here the observer role at the base level. She can view what's going on across the entire account. She cannot take action on anything. She can't edit or configure any of the different objects associated with her team. She can't take action on an incident with that observer base role. But she can be given additional permissions. She has what we call a flexible role. So manager, responder, and observer are those flexible roles. These are the most commonly used roles that you will see within most accounts. These are roles that allow you to give or remove some permissions to give your team members the right level of access. So in this case, most of my users are going to have that observer base role. And because I have advanced permissions enabled on my account, I do have the ability to give her additional permissions for a specific team or set of teams. So in this case, I can choose to assign Padma to my app dev team if that's appropriate. And I can add her as a new user by clicking on this add user button. All right, so Padma's account has now been created with her email address and her license type selected. She's also assigned to that team. If I search for her name now, she should show up here. Perfect. So I know she has been created. An invitation has been sent to her at this point. Now you can learn more about the different kinds of permissions that we have by visiting our knowledge base, support.pagerduty.com. Just search for permissions or user permissions. You'll see what the difference is between our regular permissions and our advanced permissions, as I have shown you today. I do always urge you to think about giving your users the least amount of permission that they need in order to do their job. So that's why I gave Padma that observer permission. She will then be given additional responder or manager permissions as needed. The only people who can create users in an account are global admins and the account owner. So just keep that in mind. If you, I'll show you where to find your own role within the user profile in just a moment. But do know that you need to have that specific role in order to add new users. Now, the other thing that I want to mention here is that adding individual users is not difficult at all. We can manually add those users. If you do want to upload a larger list of users, let's say 15, 20 users or more, we do have a script available in GitHub. You can find that information, again, through our knowledge base if you want to do a bulk upload of users. So once you have added some users to your account, that is fantastic. Every new user, every single user in your account should take the next step when they first log in. They're going to hover over either the picture that they see in the top right-hand corner, or perhaps the silhouette of a person here in the top right-hand corner. As I hover over that, I get a drop-down menu, select My Profile. So direct all new users to update their profile as a first action in PagerDuty. Now here we land on the contact information tab where I have things like my name. You can see that it has filled in my name, Camden Louie. I've also added PDU or PagerDuty University to my name field. I can edit any of these fields by clicking on the edit icon on the far right, the pencil on paper. I've added this team name as an example for those of you who might have larger accounts or might have folks who have similar sounding names. It's very useful to have an additional identifier like a team name or perhaps a user ID, and you can add that to the name field. Your title is easily selected as well. It's going to start out as a drop-down menu with some of our most commonly seen user titles. If you don't see your user title, like technical trainer, you can type it in, hit that return or enter button and click save. Time zone is also going to be very important to check. So all users will be given a default time zone. Now, it's always good to double check this, make sure that PagerDuty did select the appropriate time zone for you. This is going to dictate how you view information across the entire account. So if for some reason I have moved to Hawaii, I can go ahead and click save after I've selected that. Let me refresh my profile, and sure enough, the current time has updated to show my local time. This is now going to dictate how I view information across the account, from timelines to my on-call shifts. The time zone will also affect future reporting. So if you plan to pull reports to see the health and well-being of your team members, how many times they're being interrupted during daytime hours versus nighttime hours versus sleep hours, their time zone is going to dictate where they fall. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to that Pacific time. I am based in San Francisco, as I said. So it's nice to have that appropriate time zone selected. Then we get to our different contact methods. So down here we have our phone numbers, our SMS or text messages, email addresses, and push notifications. Now, let me show you what some of those different notifications look like. So we have our phone calls. You'll get a short description of what that call, what that incident entails, and you will have the ability to take action in the phone call itself. Press 4 to acknowledge, 6 to resolve, or 8 to escalate. You can also set up SMS or text messages so you can get a notification about that message. Again, a short description will show, and you will have those codes to take action to acknowledge or resolve the incident. Now, I do want to note for SMS, those codes are going to change every time. The phone codes, the phone call codes, the 4 to acknowledge, 6 to resolve, 8 to escalate, those are not going to change. But for text messages, do make sure that you read those carefully. We also have push notifications that can be enabled with the PagerDuty mobile app. And so in the mobile app, you can enable push notifications. So you download the PagerDuty mobile app, you log in using the exact same login credentials that you've used in the web UI, and then you can take action on the incident just like you would in the web UI. So it's a very powerful tool to have. Those push notifications are a fan favorite for sure. And then lastly, you have the ability to receive an email. Now, I did want to mention that email is the one static notification type. You cannot respond to the incident via email. You can't acknowledge or resolve an incident. So whereas phone, SMS, and push all allow you to take action right there on your device, email, you'll have to click into either this view incident button or any of the hyperlinks within the email, and that will take you into the UI. Before I go back to my user profile, I did want to mention our chat ops integrations. You have the ability to extend your ability to use the PagerDuty platform to respond to incidents by setting up your chat ops tool, Slack or Microsoft Teams. And with either of those options, you will have the ability to connect your team's services to that tool. So you can receive notifications, you can take action on those incidents, and your teams can correspond with one another. So I did want you to see what those options look like. I will not be setting those up today in our demo, but I wanted you to know that they exist. And of course, you can learn more about them by looking at the integration guides in our knowledge base. Let me navigate back to my user profile. So now that we've seen how we can be notified, I wanted to show you those individual contact methods again: phone call, SMS, email, and push notification. As a best practice, we do recommend that you have at least one contact method for each of these channels. So I have a phone number here. I can easily add a new contact method, put in the country code, and then type in that phone number. This is a fake UK phone number. I have the ability to then choose a category or a label over here in this drop-down menu. If I want to be very specific though, I could choose other and type in my own label. Let's call this UK mobile. If I click save, I now have a new contact method that has been added. Now it is very easy to edit any of our contact methods. You just click on this edit icon, same thing as up above in the fields. You can also remove any contact methods by clicking the X on the far right. So let's go ahead and remove that fake UK number. I also wanted to mention email address. This is going to populate with your login email, but this is not going to be tied to your login email once your account is created. So you can edit this email address and it will not affect your login email. Push notifications are going to show up under this mobile app option. So whatever mobile devices, whether they are tablets or phones you have used to download the PagerDuty mobile app and log in to your account with, you will see those devices enabled here, and you'll be able to receive those push notifications. So once you've entered your contact methods, I always recommend using this test button. It allows you to receive a notification to ensure that you typed things incorrectly. Sure enough, I'm getting that test push notification. Excellent. So I know that I set things up correctly. I typed in the correct phone numbers. I also know what it looks like or sounds like if PagerDuty is contacting me. Now, I did want to mention here that we have something called the PagerDuty V card or contact card. So you can save all of the numbers PagerDuty would use to contact you as a single contact in your phone, which allows you to easily identify when PagerDuty is the one calling you or texting you. It's not just an unknown number. All right, so once you've added your information here, you can then get to the notification rules tab. Now, in PagerDuty, we have two different types of incidents: high urgency incidents and low urgency incidents. So high urgency incidents are going to be those critical, time-sensitive incidents, things that need to be addressed immediately. They are going to escalate using your escalation policies if the first person does not acknowledge the incident. They are also going to notify you using what we call your high urgency notification rules, this first section that we will talk about in a moment. We also have low urgency incidents in PagerDuty. These are going to be less critical incidents. They don't need to interrupt you or wake you up or pull you out of a meeting. Instead, these can be addressed within your SLAs, your service level agreements for your team. Often this can be something like, I'm expected to respond to these within a 24-hour period. This is a PagerDuty example. If I receive a low urgency incident, I don't need to respond to it within minutes, but instead I have about a business day to get back to that issue. these low urgency incidents are never going to escalate using an escalation policy. It will just contact that first person who's on call, and then it will stop. So we have a different set of rules that we can set up there. But let's start with setting up these high urgency incident notification rules. You can see here that I've created a pretty robust, noisy set of rules. The first thing that's going to happen is I am going to immediately receive a push notification. Let me hit edit so you can see how I did that. So 0 minutes after the incident is assigned to me, contact me via, and then I have my push notification selected. If I click on that menu bar, you should see all of the different contact methods that you had added on the previous contact information tab. I can see my 4 different modes of communication. I have chosen push notification as the first one. I can then say, what happens if I don't hear or see or respond to that first notification? Well, if a minute passes, so 1 minute after the incident is assigned to me or 1 minute later, I'm going to receive a phone call to my mobile device. I've then set it up so that if I don't answer that first phone call, maybe I have do not disturb set up on my phone. I can actually get a second phone call that will automatically push through and will contact me, will call me and make noise because I've saved PagerDuty as a contact in my phone. And even though I have do not disturb on, I've set PagerDuty as one of my favorites, or I've set up my settings so that if a phone call comes from the same contact within a 3-minute period, it will push that second phone call through. For whatever reason, I like to hard code that in essentially for these different steps and add a second phone call here. Now you can see after that, I've staggered my notifications. So 2 minutes later or 3 minutes later, I'll get a different contact method, a different notification from a different contact method until I acknowledge the incident or the incident escalates. Now, we'll talk about escalation policies in a few minutes. I did want to show you what happens when we add a new notification rule. You choose how many minutes after the incident was triggered or incident was assigned to you, and then you select that notification type. So let's add another push notification in there. You individually get to decide what will work best for you. So go ahead and set up your notification rules. I recommend building them out to about 15 minutes after the incident is triggered, but it is something that can be edited at any point in time. It's also something you can update based on your escalation policies. All right, so we have these different notifications set up for high urgency incidents. The other section I want to mention, of course, were those low urgency incidents. Typically, I just need to get one notification to let me know. A push notification is fine. I'll receive that push notification. If I am in the middle of something else, I can come back to it later. But that's typically enough to remind me that this incident has been triggered. It's low urgency. I need to look at it later. We do have a number of other sections here for when you would be notified when an incident that I'm subscribed to has a status update. We will come back to what that means to get a status update when we respond to the incident, but I did want to just show you that you can set up email, push notification, or text message for these last 2 sections. We do save the phone calls just for when incidents are assigned to you. And again, this last section, before I go on call or off call, you can get a reminder. Many people like to set this up. It's a nice way of getting that reminder about your upcoming shift or if you're about to do a handoff or something like that. All right, so those are our notification methods, the contact information that we have, as well as our notification rules. I did want to show you one thing about the mobile app. So you will have the ability to set up custom sounds for your PagerDuty mobile app notifications for high urgency and low urgency incidents. And so I do urge you to look at those different options. They're some very unique sounds. That way, you know, it's PagerDuty contacting you and not just another one of those mobile app notifications that you have. All right, so in the user profile, I did want to show just a couple other things under the user settings. This is where login and email is located. You can also see what your base role is in this particular example, I'm the account owner of my demo account. And we also have a calendar field here. So this is where the web cal feed or the iCalendar file can be downloaded and added to your personal calendar. I always recommend using the web cal feed where you can, because this is a dynamic updating option. The iCalendar file is going to be static. So you'll have to come back here and download the iCalendar file regularly, whereas the web cal feed will update based on changes made to your shifts. All right. And so then I wanted to just mention Teams again. So under the People menu, you have the ability to navigate to the Teams directory. This is where any existing teams in your account can be located. We talked about the user directory earlier. So this is where you can either create a new team if you have those permissions, or find your team. You can search for the name or click into the team for the details page. So for my app dev team, I can see the different users, schedules, escalation policies, services, and subscriptions. Now for my users, this is where I can view and change those different roles as needed for users that are part of the team. If your user has a little drop-down menu next to their name under team role, you are able to change their permission level for team objects. So when they're responding to an incident, when they are looking at schedules and escalation policies and services, they will have the appropriate permission level based on what has been selected here. Now, a few of us do not have that little drop-down menu because we have a fixed role, as I mentioned earlier. But for Cho here, as an example, I could choose to give her those responder permissions for this team. And so you can easily make those updates. It's very, very helpful for team managers to have that located in one place. Now, teams will also come into play because they help you to filter the UI. Now, let me go back to that incident dashboard that I first started on. This is looking at all of the open incidents, or I could just say, let's look at incidents of any status. I can say, instead of looking at all of the incidents of any status here, instead, I just want to view the incidents that are related to my teams. So I can filter my view, help reduce some of the noise that I have to sort through in order to better see and address the incidents that are related to my teams, or even the incidents that are assigned to me specifically. So those filters will come into play on a few different pages. I wanted to show you teams right there, just very briefly. Now, the next piece that you will need to configure are schedules and escalation policies. These are also located under the People menu. I'm going to select on-call schedules from that People menu. And here I have the ability to search for any existing schedules. So I can say, do I have, a weekly schedule already created for a particular team? I can search for a team name, whatever I need to look for, I can search for that. I can also filter based on a particular team. So instead of seeing 20 pages of teams, of schedules, I could filter that down to say, I only want to see the schedules associated with my teams specifically. That has now reduced the number of pages to 11, which is helpful. It definitely reduces the amount of noise and amount of the number of schedules I have to filter through. Now, there are a number of different kinds of schedules that you can create. Let me first show you a manager schedule. Let's say I have a very simple, I would say common weekly schedule that is set up. So let's say that here I have this Gus calendar on-call schedule. I have a label on it that says manager that allows me to easily identify who is part of this schedule. I'll talk about the labels when we create a brand new schedule in a moment. Now, as I look at the schedule, I'm able to see a preview of the next coming weeks, and I can see Petunia's currently on call for this manager schedule, and then Minerva will go on call next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific. Now, this might not be a perfectly, it's not quite a weekly schedule, but you can see those swaths and how easily it transitions to the next person. It can be very similar to a weekly schedule. We have Alicia here who's on call for a week, and then I go on call for a week, and it keeps on rotating forward. We would just need to view a little bit more there. All right, so you can easily click into any of the details of these different schedules by clicking on the title here. So I can click in to view more details. For example, I might have deleted a user from the account. They're no longer with our team. PagerDuty will tell you if there are any inactive users who have been deleted from your account, so you can replace them and update them easily. But I wanted to actually show you how to create a net new schedule, a slightly more complicated net new schedule. So I'm going to do that by clicking on this new schedule button. All right, so let's give this schedule a name. Let's say that this is my mobile accounts team, and I'm going to call this primary. This is going to be the schedule with the primary on-call users. I can associate it with a particular name. Let's say this is with a particular set of teams, like my app dev team, my Android team. Let's say my application development team is also relevant here. I can choose what time zone I want to build this schedule in. Now, PagerDuty is automatically going to choose Pacific time since that's where I'm located. But if I wanted to create a schedule in a different time zone, or in this example, let's say I choose UTC for my particular team. We're a global team. I'm going to create a schedule that covers the entire world. So instead of having it based in one time zone where we're subject to somebody's daylight savings, those time shifts, I've decided I want to build it in UTC. So I'm going to actually put a short description here to say layer 1 represents my APJ shift. Layer 2 represents my EMEA shift, or my EMEA region, and layer 3 is going to represent the Americas shift. So I am covering the globe with these 3 shifts. I'm going to break it up so that each shift is responsible for an 8-hour period. So that's easy. There are 3 8-hour periods during the day, and I've given each layer a label. So for layer 1, you can leave it numbered as layer 1, or you can customize your shift name. So for this first layer of the schedule, I'm calling it my APJ shift. I can then choose which users are part of this team. So I can scroll through and I can find the appropriate users. Or if necessary, I can always search for a user's name. And I can add my users. I can rearrange the order that I want them to rotate in by dragging and dropping their names. I can also click the X next to their name to remove them from this rotation of users. I then will say step number 2, set up their on-call rotation. In this case, we start with a rotation type. I have weekly selected automatically, but you could choose to change that to a daily rotation or even come up with some kind of custom rotation. So let's say every 4 days, we have a new person go on call. So you have those different options. And with your shift length and your rotation type, you then choose a handoff time. So if this were a weekly rotation, I would just need to choose a day of the week. Let's say Monday at, we're going to say midnight, because I'm creating this UTC-based global coverage or follow the sun type of schedule. So for this particular APJ shift, every Monday starting at midnight, a new on-call user is going to go, a new user in APJ is going to go on call. So I have that user selected. If I scroll down, you can see that Alicia here will be on call until next Monday at midnight, and then James goes on call. And then a week later, Padma goes on call at midnight. So that makes sense based on what I've said here. Now I can add additional restrictions though, because I said there are going to be 3 different shifts. So what does that mean? Let's go ahead and add a restriction here. I'm going to click on the add restrictions button. With this pop-up, I'm able to add restrictions to times of the day or even to times of the week. So for this example, I'm going to say for times of the day, I want this first layer to this APJ shift to be on call from midnight until 8 a.m. That's their 8-hour shift. And then it goes to the EMEA region. So now I have my little 8-hour shift represented here for the APJ shift. I can see they are on call from midnight until 8 a.m. UTC, and then they go off call, and nobody is currently on call for those 16 hours in between. Now, you do have the ability to also set step 3 to set your changes or your layer to begin at a certain future date. We're not going to do that for today. We're just creating a net new schedule, but that is useful. So you can come back to that later on. Now, what happens for those 16 hours in between those on-call shifts? Well, if nobody is on call in a schedule, then PagerDuty cannot assign an incident to that person, to a person, and actually it cannot create an incident. So once we take these schedules, we'll put them on escalation policies. PagerDuty will look at the escalation policy. If no one is on call, they will not be able to create an incident. The system will not be able to create an incident. So it is important that we think about that and we perhaps create multiple layers. So in this case, I'm going to create my EMEA shift. I'm going to select my users who are on call for this EMEA shift, and then I will select what kind of rotation I want them to be on. They wanted to rotate, let's say, on a daily basis. Their handoff time or start of shift is 8 a.m. Again, UTC time. And before I add restrictions, I wanted to show you what this looks like. EMEA shift, layer number 2, is showing up here as expected. Every day, starting at 8 a.m., a new person goes on call. Now, if we look at the final schedule, we can see that we have somebody on call at every hour of the day, which is great, but we're not seeing the APJ shift at all. Now, why is that? In PagerDuty, the bottom layer always takes precedence over the top layer. So in this case, the bottom layer is layer 2, the EMEA shift. If the EMEA shift is covering up the top layer, it's going to show up here in the final schedule. Now, I want to fix that so that our different shifts are showing up just for their 8-hour period. So I'm going to add a restriction. I'm going to add that restriction to say that my user is on call from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. And now I can see that those 2 layers line up really nicely next to one another. So 8 hours for APJ, 8 hours for EMEA, and now we just have one empty 8-hour shift that is still left. So let's add that new Americas layer. Let's call it the America shift. I can add my different users. And let's see, you can see different users have different colors. I have just chosen everyone who seems to have a green, green color selected. So I'm going to see if we can choose somebody a little different. All right, there we go. That's a little better. So we have our different users who are rotating here. Let's give them that custom duration. I'm going to have them rotate every 5 days. And it's going to start today at 4 p.m. or the start of their shift. Now, again, right now, it means that they're rotating on a 5-day basis, but they are the Americas shift at the bottom, which means they're overriding basically everybody above them. That's not what I want to do. So let's add restrictions and add a restriction so that they're only on call from 4 p.m. until midnight. So this is a third 8-hour shift. It matches perfectly with my other on-call shifts for the regions that I've selected. And now we always have coverage in our final schedule. There's always somebody on call, which means an incident can always be created. Let me now save this schedule. And so the folks who are going to be configuring or editing these schedules, like I just showed you, are the people who have at least a team manager permissions level or higher. They can have manager or global admin permissions at the account level as well. So any responder or observer will have the ability to click in and view what's going on here in their team schedules. Now, for responders, or for any users, actually, I wanted to show you one other thing called an override in a moment. But before I do that, let me just finish up with creating these different schedules. Again, the way you view things will be dictated based on this time zone that is selected. So let's say I wanted to view this information in my Los Angeles time zone. since I am Pacific time, I can now view information for these accounts to say, okay, this America's shift is going to be going from 11:55 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. Now, we'll come back to that pop-up window that I just saw. If you hover your mouse over any of these upcoming shifts, it will give you a preview of the time zones or of the time frame. Before I show you how to create what we call an override, though, I wanted to also tell you, okay, I labeled this primary, mobile apps primary, mobile accounts primary, excuse me. Now, if I wanted to create a backup or secondary schedule, the easiest thing to do is to copy the schedule. So I clicked on the copy the schedule button on the far right. Let's give this a name again, mobile accounts. Let's change it, mobile accounts. I'm going to call this backup or secondary to indicate that this is actually going to be my supporting person. I can again assign different teams if I wanted to do that. Everything else has copied over exactly as it was in that first primary schedule. Now I just want to change the order in which my users are rotating. So I'm going to drag the bottom user to the top of the list or the top user to the bottom of the list. And that allows me to use the exact same users, but to have them supporting one another. So in this case, now I have Fred, who's currently on call. I think Dobby was on call for my primary schedule. So Fred is going to support his team member from the same region. He'll be the backup person on call. So we can save that schedule now. And here we have our mobile accounts backup or secondary schedule created. Now, as I was saying earlier, what happens if somebody needs to create an override? Now in PagerDuty, overrides represent those one-time shift changes that need to occur. So instead of having to come in here, ask your manager to change the entire schedule, if let's say Fred is unavailable for his upcoming shift on Saturday, I can create a one-time override for him, or he can come in here as a responder and create that override as well. It's going to automatically populate with my name, but he could easily choose somebody else from the list. I could choose somebody else from the list. Let's say Adrian volunteered. Our team has made a point of communicating about this change. Adrian volunteered to take over for Fred for his shift. He could take over the whole shift, or I could change it to take over just part of the shift. I'm going to create that override. And now a new override layer has been created. Adrian's name has been added. He's now the bottom layer, taking precedence over the top layer, which is why in the final schedule, Adrian's name is going to show up for that shift instead of Fred. Now, if anything changes, Fred no longer needs coverage for that shift. He can delete that upcoming override, let Adrian know he's no longer needed. But for right now, let's go ahead and leave Adrian's name in there, so you can see that override in action. So you do not need to be a team manager in order to create an override. Any responder or manager will be able to come in and create an override for an existing schedule. All right, so that's a lot of information about schedules, those on-call rotations. Now, the way these schedules are then used is when we create escalation policies. So we now have the rotation, we know who to contact, but when are they actually going to be contacted? So I'm going to go back to my people menu, select escalation policies. So escalation policies are going to connect those services, those technical services that we'll create in a moment, to the individual users and schedules to make sure that the right people are being notified at the appropriate time. So under my escalation policies page, I have the ability to view existing escalation policies. I can filter based on teams, search for a team name. I can read escalation policies top to bottom to see exactly who is contacted at any point in time. For right now, though, I'm going to click on this new escalation policy button to show you how I set this up. Let's go ahead and stick with the same name, mobile accounts EP or escalation policy. I'm going to get right into the different rules here. There are a few other fields you could fill out, but let's just go right down to immediately after an incident is triggered. What is going to happen? Well, step number one, we are going to notify the following users or schedules. So I'm going to click into that box to say, okay, who is going to be notified first? Let's search for my schedule that I just created, that mobile accounts primary schedule. And I want that person who's on call to be contacted first. Now, if they are not able to acknowledge the incident within a certain period of time, I, as the team manager, get to determine what that time is. So let's say for our team, we give them 10 minutes to acknowledge the incident. If they do not acknowledge the incident, then we want to escalate to their backup or secondary person. So I have that mobile accounts backup schedule. I can give my secondary or backup person a certain amount of time. Let's give them 8 minutes to acknowledge the incident. If they do not acknowledge the incident within 8 minutes, let's say we have a tertiary or third level. So this is where I could use a manager schedule, or I could have created some kind of third level of the escalation or third schedule to put here for the escalation policy. I do also have the ability to choose individual users to put them on a schedule, or to put multiple schedules down into one of these layers of the escalation policy. So let's choose another one of my schedules. I have my Gus calendar on-call schedule for my managers, my app dev manager schedule, and Adrian here. Let's say Adrian is floating. He's a new user who's supporting us. I can give this level, the escalation policy, a certain period of time, let's say 10 minutes again. And now we've gotten to the end of the escalation policy. You can keep building it out. Typically, we would say 3 levels is a best practice: primary, backup, and tertiary levels. If no one acknowledges the incident, I have the ability to check that box and repeat this escalation policy up to 9 times. I'm going to click save to show you how to read this. So top to bottom, my mobile accounts escalation policy. Immediately after the incident is triggered, step 1, my primary on-call responder is going to be notified. Angelina is the person on call for that schedule right now. She will be notified using her high urgency notification rules that she set up in her profile for 10 minutes or until she acknowledges the incident. If she does not acknowledge the incident in 10 minutes, we then contact the backup person, Fred. He is going to be on call. He's being contacted for 10 minutes, or excuse me, for 8 minutes using his high urgency notification rules. After 8 minutes, we're going to escalate to the third level where I have Regulus, Adrian, and Petunia all on call. All 3 of them would be notified about the incident at the same time. As soon as one of them acknowledges the incident, their name will be associated with the incident and they will stop the escalation process. If none of them acknowledge the incident after 10 minutes, we could get to the end and just stop, or we can repeat the escalation policy and make sure that we don't miss one of those important time-sensitive incidents. Now, this is not what I would consider a best practice. We want to reduce the number of people who are interrupted. So I would recommend just having 1 person for each level. Or let me show you another option. So I have multiple people select on one of those levels of the escalation policy. Now, an individual person is not recommended because it means they will be contacted 24/7, 365 days of the year. We want to make sure that we use schedules wherever possible. So even if we have multiple schedules or multiple schedules and users on an escalation policy, let me find another example here. I have a lot of schedules in this account. So, okay, here's an example. If I have multiple schedules or even multiple schedules and users, as you might need, there was a little checkbox when we were editing that escalation policy. So your manager can choose to assign via round robin, meaning it's going to rotate between the on-call person for these different schedules and this on-call user for each incident. So the next time an incident is triggered, the SC database primary will be contacted. Then the time after that, an incident will be triggered and assigned to the alpha team primary. The time after that, it will be assigned to George. This little green arrow indicates who will be next in that rotation. Whew, okay, so lots of information there to talk about how to create and add users to those schedules to ensure we understand who's on call for a rotation, and then to use those escalation policies to figure out exactly who would be contacted at what point in time and in what order we're going to set those folks up. Now, there are some suggested practices that I've mentioned here, making sure we reduce the number of people on a level of the escalation policy, so that it's not too noisy, you don't tire out your teams too quickly. Also, make sure you use a schedule as opposed to a person wherever possible. We also want to emphasize aligning the notification rules with escalation timeouts. I mentioned that earlier when we were looking at our profile. Look at your escalation timeouts when you're creating your user profile notification rules, because that will help you determine how long should I build my rules out for. Should they be built out for at least 15 minutes because some of the escalation timeouts are 12 or 13 minutes, or are they always shorter than that? And lastly, every user, whether you're a manager or a responder or an observer, should familiarize themselves with their active escalation policies. That just ensures that you understand how and when you would be contacted, and you can better plan for and anticipate those necessary items and those necessary times. All right. So the last configuration item I wanted to talk about are services. We have both technical and business services in PagerDuty. And here's a quick visual of how they interact. Now, most teams are going to be responsible for technical services. These are going to be the specific areas that your team might be responsible for. So as an example, for my team, we're responsible for the checkout function. Now, a different team is responsible for payments. Another one is responsible for app server, for the app server. But all three of these technical services, all three of these teams are part of a larger area of the business called the shopping cart area of the business. So business services allow us to see a larger overarching area, to see that hierarchy of services and how your technical service, your team's service is going to impact the business at a higher level. There's also a tool within the PagerDuty account, I'll show this to you in a moment, called the service graph, which allows you to visualize and create what we think of as a living, breathing asset that helps to codify your technical and business services and those relationships that they have with one another across your entire organization. So there are a lot of benefits here. It means that if there's an incident, you can quickly and easily identify the blast radius of that incident, who is going to be impacted by that incident. It also means that you can more easily facilitate cross-team collaboration and better communication. You also just have a better overview of this topography and those relationships at a glance. So going back into my demo account now, under the services menu, this is where we can identify and find that service graph. Take a quick look at what's going on. My service graph is very complicated, has lots of different relationships that have been built out across the account, but I want you to just see what that can look like. You can filter your view down. So if you only want to see the things related to the app performance service, it's a much smaller, more concrete view. That's very helpful. Round shapes are going to represent technical services. Square shapes represent the business services. But now I just want to show you how to actually set up a technical service. So under the services menu, I'm selecting service directory. This shows me all of the existing technical services. I can again search for a technical service, filter for teams, filter for a particular business service, the last time they had an incident, or even just by name. I'm going to create a net new service right now, though. So let's create a new technical service. Let's say that this is my mobile account creation technical service. So we're in charge of mobile accounts and their creation. So if anything goes wrong, my team is the team that should know about this. I could write a short description and then click the next button, where I then decide who will be assigned to an incident that is triggered. Well, we can generate a brand new escalation policy, or we could use that escalation policy that we just created for mobile accounts. This is the team that should be contacted if a problem arises for this technical service. Click next. For those of you who have noise reduction capabilities, you'll see alert grouping here, where you have the ability to choose intelligent alert grouping, meaning PagerDuty will use machine learning to help reduce the amount of noise you're sorting through. We can take the alerts and say, these are actually related. Let's group them under one incident so you're not being constantly bombarded about the same thing. You can also choose to use content-based alert grouping. So if there's a particular field, like a ticket number or server name that you wanted to group your alerts on, you could do that as well. Time-based alert grouping is the simplest of those alert grouping options. You can say, if alerts come in within a 5-minute period, I want them to be grouped together. For today, I'll go ahead and select intelligent alert grouping. We also have transient alerts. If you have flapping alerts, meaning your tool will tell you there's a problem, but often it will auto resolve itself within a certain period of time. You can say, instead of interrupting a responder and alarming them, making them work on something that's going to automatically fix itself, let's go ahead and auto pause those incident notifications for a set period of time. Let's say 5 minutes. I can then choose next. And this gets to our integrations. So everybody can select integrations. This is the source of information for your service. How do we know when there's a problem? Well, we have some of our most popular integrations located right here on the integrations page. Let's say my team uses Microsoft Azure. We also use Datadog. I can also, if I don't see it here on the most popular integrations, search for an integration. So perhaps we use Zendesk, and something called the Camden tool. Now, PagerDuty has over 700 partner integrations, like these integrations that I've selected here, but the Camden integration is not one of those. So instead of choosing an integration from the drop-down menu, I can choose to set up my own integration using our Events API. And I can even set up an email integration if necessary. So these are some of our more commonly used integration types. These are sources of information and how we're going to funnel them into PagerDuty. I'm now going to create my service, which will take me to a tab within the service details page, my mobile account creation details page. I land on this integrations tab where I have these integration guidelines. These integration guides will guide me through setting up the integration with PagerDuty and that tool, Microsoft Azure in this example. I can grab the integration key and set up my flow of information. The last thing I want to show you within our service detail page, though, is under settings. So this is where you can choose who to assign and notify for an incident. Now, as I've already set up, my mobile accounts escalation policy is going to be contacted if an incident is triggered. But do I always want my incidents to require high urgency notifications and to escalate as needed? Or do I want there to sometimes be low urgency incidents? Well, if I click edit for this section, I can choose how my responders should be notified. I can select the drop-down menu to choose my options. High urgency notifications, always escalate as needed. Low urgency notifications, do not escalate. Do I want to use dynamic notifications based on the alert severity, which is a field that comes in from your tool, and it will tell PagerDuty if it should be high urgency or low urgency? Or lastly, do I want to use support hours? This is one of our more commonly used options. Based on support hours, I have different expectations for our team. So during Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., during that kind of business hours period, I always want my responders to receive high urgency notifications. But outside of that, I want to use dynamic notifications. So I can set up support hours to tell PagerDuty how a user should be notified during those particular periods of time. I'm going to click Save Changes here. And now I have changed my Assign and Notify option to say notifications will be sent out based on support hours. Oh, lots of information here. So once we have set up these different pieces, they all come together because we've now connected our individual users to having incidents triggered and assigned to those people. So what happens? Well, let's go to the incident dashboard again. I just clicked on this PagerDuty logo. You can click on the incidents menu. It will take you back here. I'm going to look at all of the incidents that are currently triggered for all teams. I want to see any open incident, so that could be triggered or resolved. I can see that there are a few open incidents. Now, these will often be triggered by your monitoring tools. You can manually trigger a new incident as well through either the UI, mobile or web UI, or through your chat tools, Slack and Microsoft Teams. In this case, I'm going to look at an existing incident. So I see that this homepage not responding incident has been triggered. And as I click in, I see a little bit of information here. Things like the status. The status is currently in the triggered state. You have 3 incident states for PagerDuty: triggered, acknowledged, and resolved. So it's currently in the triggered state. I can see that it's currently assigned to Regulus. He is the person who's being contacted using his high urgency notification rules to let him know that there's an incident that has been triggered. I also see that there's a pending action. So PagerDuty is going to escalate this incident in 9 minutes if Regulus does not acknowledge the incident. Interesting. So let's go ahead and acknowledge the incident. I've clicked on this acknowledge button here in the UI. And now my name is associated with this. I've changed the status to acknowledge. There is no longer a pending action field here. So I can start to take action to do my assessment on this incident, so that I can let people know what's going on. If there's any information that I can provide them, if I need to loop in additional users. I do have the ability to escalate the incident. So you can see Regulus was on call, and he could always escalate it up to his team manager as an example. Or we could reassign the incident. I could say, I've done my assessment. It doesn't belong to my team. This is actually a problem for our Android mobile client escalation policy. That team needs to be contacted. I can reassign it to that team. You can see it's gone back to the triggered state. It is assigned to Garrick. He's the person on call. It's going to escalate after 10 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge that incident again, though. So I've acknowledged the incident. I can escalate the incident. I can reassign the incident. I can add additional responders. If I want to keep my ownership of the incident, but I want to add additional teams to say, okay, instead of reassigning it to the Android team, I actually want to ask for them to help me, to collaborate with me. I can send them a short message. I could add a conference bridge, a dial-in number, a meeting URL, click save. So lots of manual actions here. I also have the ability, as I scroll down, to look at status updates. So this would show me if my incident was impacting any particular business services. Now, business services, you can create and view under the services menu. We're not going to do that today, but you can access them if you need to. Now, I don't have any business services that are currently being impacted. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I can choose to add some subscribers, teams or users who don't need to actively respond to the incident, but do need to be kept up to date. So I can manage my subscribers. I could come in here and manually add some individual users or even particular teams, add them as subscribers, go back to my incident. And now they can get proactive updates from my team if a status update is published. So I'm going to click on this new update button, show you how to set up a status update. Let's say I'm using my default template to send out the message. I can type out, we are working on the homepage issue, update in 20 minutes. So I can send this out via SMS, push, and on the status page. Also, a rich text email can be sent out with more information if you'd like to do that. You can create different templates for different kinds of circumstances. You can always edit the email to add additional fields. Let's go ahead and just send that update as is. Now, under the status updates tab, I can see that the status update was pushed out to them. I can also view that email here. It has been sent out to my one user who is a subscriber. It has also been published on the status dashboard. Now, this incident will only show on the status dashboard, though, if it is showing impact for a business service. Now, business services will only show impact if your incident has a priority assigned to it. Now, in this case, I have P1 through P5 set up on my account. Those are the priorities that I've defined. Let's say that this is a P1. I've done my assessment. This is a big problem. So if my service is associated with a business service, and I just refresh the page, I can see that the mobile app UK, the mobile app 123, the mobile app performance business services are all impacted by this incident. And if I go to the status dashboard, which you can find by clicking on the internal status page here under status in the menu bar, I can also see that my incident is showing up here on the dashboard, and I can see that last status update that I published right here on this dashboard as well. This is a page that's used, again, mostly by your stakeholders or by folks who don't need to actively respond to the incident, but need to get updates. So it's a very useful internal page. There is also an external status page. We're not going to talk about that today, though. So I've shown you some of these wonderful steps that you can take, a couple other resources. You can see a timeline of the incident, what has happened, what actions have been taken. If you have the capability to see past incidents that are similar to this one, you could click in and see what happened and what actions were taken. Or if there are any related incidents that are currently open across other services that PagerDuty thinks might be of interest to you. So you could hopefully reduce the time it takes for you to respond to this. But what I wanted to show you as a last step for responding to an incident is something called an incident workflow, because this is going to allow you to automate some of the actions that I showed you. So let's say I've assigned my priority under this button that should say run workflow or run a play if you've previously used response plays. We have our feature incident workflows that are available to us that a manager can set up during the non-emergency, non-incident time so that I don't have to sit here and think about what actions need to be taken during a P1 response, but I can just come in here and run this workflow. These could be run manually, they could be run automatically or based on certain conditions. Now, in this case, it looks like a conference bridge has been added here. I have some additional responders who have been requested. If I look at my status update, I can see additional teams were subscribed to this incident and that an automatic status update was published for me. I did not have to do all of those steps manually. So wherever possible, let's automate some of those steps. And now I can loop in the appropriate people. So hopefully we can acknowledge or rather, they will accept my invitations to join me, and then we can resolve that incident as quickly as possible. Because that's really what all of these steps are for, is to help you resolve an incident as quickly as possible so that the least amount of impact is felt by your organization. So I clicked on that resolve button. I'm going to go ahead and resolve the incident for today. That is just a look at some of the different pieces that you will need to set up in PagerDuty to allow you to get things back to normal. And there is always, and I should just point this out, there's always the option to create that post-mortem. We recommend doing some kind of post-mortem or post-incident learning. We do have that capability built into the platform for those of you who want to do that. But for your next steps, please download that PagerDuty V card to save PagerDuty as a contact in your phone. Start configuring your PagerDuty account. And lastly, I wanted to show you some other resources. You always have access to our on-demand modules at customerpdu.pagerduty.com as a PagerDuty user. Within the PagerDuty platform, if you navigate to this little question mark icon over here on the top menu bar, I can select the PagerDuty University page. It will open up that separate portal and you'll have access to our on-demand modules and things like that. So come back to this page whenever you need to take additional steps. You'll have different options within our catalog there. But that is the end of our getting started session today. I hope this has helped you to understand some first steps to take. If you have any further questions about training, please access both the on-demand portal or reach out to the PDU team, pdu@pagerduty.com. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.